Hello and welcome to WJTS in.form. I'm your host, Bill Potter on WJTS. We are always pleased when Mark Messmer stops in and talks with us. And Mark always has a lot to bring up because the legislation is always very busy this time of year. Yesterday, we talked with Mark about the starting of the legislation and some of the bills he's pushing through. Now, in this edition of WJTS in.form, we're going to talk with Mark about really, I guess, 4 issues that are statewide going to get a lot of attention because the governor is behind these acts. And we want to welcome Representative Mark Messmer to the show. And Mark, let's start talking about what the governor is wanting to get done.
All right. Well, he had 4 high priority items, and we'll call it the 30,000-foot view of what he'd like to get done. You know, kind of the big encompassing issues. The first one that he had on his list was elimination of the business personal property tax, and that's really an issue that it's not a state tax fund at all. It's money that totally goes to fund local government, city government, county government, you know, part of the capital money that goes to schools. So it's strictly a local taxation policy issue, but you know it's an issue that the legislature, you know, sets the rules for.
Okay. And
what his initial announcement was, he'd like to see that tax eliminated. And as a business owner, I'd like to see that tax eliminated. You know, but I guess the caveat of it is, you know, it's a $1 billion implication to local funding. The majority of that would get absorbed by the cities and towns, you know, some to the county, some to the schools. But to just flat out say tomorrow it's gone, that's probably anywhere from a 10 to 15% cut to most local funding sources. I think in Jasper, Mayor Seitz had them calculate up. It would be a $1.2 million loss in revenue to the city of Jasper. So, pretty significant reduction if it's just here today, gone tomorrow. I don't think that's going to be possible to do just from that amount of cutting that we make them able to do. Some discussions we've had within our caucus is if we phased it out slowly, and just stopped putting it on new property but didn't take the old property off the books, it would take a couple of decades for it to slowly drop off the books. But even just stopping it on new investment would be about a 12% reduction in that. I mean, it would take it from $1 billion to $120 million, and then that still would be a significant cut by the time you trickle that down to all your locals. And what we looked at is if there's a way to do something to give them a replacement mechanism for that, phase it in slow and let them have a way to recoup it. Because I think most of our communities have cut pretty closely on with property tax caps that we've done, with the other property tax deductions that there are. Local taxation has been snugged up pretty tight for most of our communities across the state. If we would let them increase maybe fire and safety, local option income taxes as a revenue neutral offset to that, then I think there would be some willingness to move that proposal forward. But just a flat out elimination, I just don't. We've talked about it for the last 3 years. It has some merit, but it's a pretty hefty blow for locals to deal with.
And we talk about this. We're talking about personal property tax. We're not talking about property tax on your home.
No,
we're talking about tax on your equipment.
Yeah, it's basically if you're a business owner. For me, it's my off-road equipment. If it has a license plate on it, it's got excise tax. Okay. If it's computers in my office, if it's furniture in my office, if it's off-road equipment, if you're a farmer, it's your tractors, okay, your combines. If you're a manufacturer, it's that manufacturing equipment that's in that manufacturing plant. So it's basically equipment that you own that's not that's not a vehicle that you drive, but just about any other equipment that you would have is what they call personal property.
And the idea is to make Indiana very business friendly, to bring more industry in, which then businesses, which then increases other taxes and other incomes.
Right.
But boy, that would be really tough for municipalities.
It would be tough to deal with,
especially now because it seems like they keep getting cut.
They do,
and they got to figure out how to deal with less money, and then have to deal with even less money.
And I guess the flip side to well, we want to make it more business friendly. We had Dr. Michael Hicks, the Ball State economist, who comes to our interim study committee each year, and he said that the reality is, statewide, 12% of our jobs come from new companies coming to our state. Jobs growth, 12% of it is relocated or new businesses. 88% of the business growth, jobs growth, employment growth within our state comes from supporting the population that's here. And he said, so what you really need to focus on is increasing your population growth. You'll get basically 5 or 6 times more jobs created by, and what does that mean? That means make your businesses, make your communities a place people want to live. Well, if we continue to cut our local, cities and towns funding mechanism, and they can't keep our, in the counties, if we can't keep their roads built, if we can't keep their cities clean, if we can't make them places people want to live, then it's going to be counterproductive to, to what the reality is. 88% of our jobs come from growing our population and what it takes to support that population. So let's make sure we don't do things that are counter to that. And the fear I would have of just eliminating it and cutting local funding even more would be, we're going to have a tough time. How do we get broadband access increased into our communities? I mean, that's the type of quality of life issues that we need to try to do a better job of. And so we don't want to tie our hands, too much to make those things negatives.
So we'll see how that debate goes throughout the session.
Yep.
Next thing to talk about is access to preschool for underprivileged.
We started a pilot program this past year where there's going to be basically tuition vouchers for low-income folks. It's piloted in a couple of counties, to see. I guess there's a access to preschool for I guess middle-income folks is pretty normal. For low-income households, access to preschool is almost non-existent. So we started a pilot program to see about and see how how it worked. I mean, how many people utilize it in the counties that we're trying it out at. And there's some interest in how we're going to expand that. Now it's a non-budget year, so any policy that we adopt that would run through the 2014-2015 years. I mean, at this point it'll be discussions. Let's analyze how that pilot program worked, and is it do we want to put the pieces in place to expand that later to allow more people to have access to preschool for low-income folks.
Okay.
So,
and then road funding changes. There have been some bills passed last year concerning road funding.
Right.
But there are changes to them this year, or
well,
implementation?
No changes. I guess
Okay.
what we started last year was really a structural change to the excise tax and road funding.
Okay.
There used to be, of the 18 cents per gallon that's collected on fuel, we were putting 12 cents of that to road maintenance, and 6 cents was going to overhead items, to fund the BMV, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and State Police. Well, we took the overhead items and are paying them out of the general fund, and now all 18 cents are going to road funding. And that meant a 35% increase to every city and town, a 35% increase to every county highway budget, and a 35% increase to NDOT for maintaining roads, which is sorely needed. I mean, we're really, we're probably a decade behind, of seeing, with fuel standards going up, with fuel consumption going down. There's been for the last decade a steady decline in that, in that funding of maintenance dollars. So we've got all that 18 cents going. Everybody got a 35% increase. We need to be disciplined enough now to look down the road and maintain that change, and not give in to the pressures of messing with that. But on top of that, the change we started this year, and what we really need to continue to move forward. We're taking 20% of the sales tax on fuel. We do charge sales tax on gasoline, which we're not that many states still do, but we're going to put 20% of that sales tax to future road construction, to new road construction. And folks have asked over the years, well, how are we going to get I-69 done, as an example, from Bloomington to Annapolis? Because through the Major Moves project that was started years back, we had money for all of the construction up through 2014, 2015. and for I-69 from Evansville to Bloomington was part of that funding mechanism. Well, how we're going to do that looking down the road is that diversion of that 20% of the sales tax collected to build a base for new construction, and that'll put about $200 million a year, into future road construction. On top of that $200 million that we put in, there's always a federal match of about 3 to 1 for it. So there's, that $200 million of investment will get us, $750 million to $1 billion of money to work with each year going forward. And we need to have the discipline to maintain that, to be in the position to continue the infrastructure improvements that we've started.
And whenever anybody hears talk about taxes, they're going, "Oh, my taxes are going up." This doesn't raise any tax. This doesn't affect. This just affects how the taxes that are currently collected are being used.
Reallocating them. Yeah, okay. We're putting them to the use that they should have been intended for. So, commit to that and stay the course.
All right. Now, another issue that the governor is pushing is the skills gap.
We started in this past session with what they call regional works councils, where they're looking at geographically in different regions, how are we educating either our current high school and college students or retraining our adults, through folks that are unemployed, to fill the job needs of the 21st century. And really the first time we've involved, it involves business leaders, academic leaders, and then the governor and state elected officials to look at the job needs in each area around the state, to make sure how we're preparing our kids or retraining our adults, to fill the jobs that are out there now. There's about 50 to 60,000 unfilled jobs in the advanced manufacturing sector across the state.
Wow.
And we have a couple 100,000 unemployed, folks, but we have a large chunk of jobs that we've just not been able to fill. And a perfect example of how do we do that and do that more effectively. This fall, WJTS announced the rollout of the Advanced Manufacturing Maintenance Program, where these kids, and they've partnered up with about a half dozen businesses around Du Bois County, to where these kids will come in, they'll learn high-tech manufacturing, maintenance skills. They're going to work a couple days a week. They're going to go to school 3 days a week. And when those kids come out of school, they're going to be trained, with some highly valuable, prevalent to today, and they're going to be able to fill those kids will be hired full time by the companies that have partnered up with WJTS to get that in place. And that's an exact example of how we're going to partner business and academic folks to meet the job needs of today. Couldn't be any better.
And so really, again, Du Bois County is going to be an
Leading the
example.
way.
I'm sure that the governor's going to use this.
We should be.
Yeah.
I mean, and that program should be taken and carbon copied. And if we have VU in our neck of the woods, but there's Ivy Techs across the state who could take that same process, go to their employers in those areas, look for the way to fill the skills gap, bridge that gap. And the policy we started last year set up those regional councils. We're going to continue to grow that and refine it and make sure that we're getting an effective product out there with the regional councils.
Something else that I just thought of, and this goes way back, is this the year that state taxes will now be applied to online purchases? Wasn't there a deal that was worked out with Amazon?
I believe it does go into effect in July, or I don't know if it was January 1 or July 1, but I think this is the year that it's.
I think this is the year that it goes into effect, and so people start getting in line, and that'll help the local people.
Oh,
they
yeah.
won't have to compete in a way that they unfairly did before.
The brick and mortar retailers have really taken a punishment from the online sales being sales tax exempt when they're in your state and they're selling to people in your state. The rules are supposed to be you charge sales tax, and there's been a carve out for Amazon specifically that Governor Daniels had negotiated with them to bring them into Indiana, which they do have a large presence here now, but that's put them in a competitive advantage over the local retailers who don't have that option, who take it on the chin. So
Well, Mark, thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Our guest has been State Representative Mark Messmer, who is currently in Indianapolis as legislation started on Monday. Thank you for watching WJTS in.form. We hope that Mark comes back and kind of fills us in as the legislation goes this year.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good day. This is WJTS in.form. We are local people watching local people.